Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. LMG Security is going to be presenting a cyber alert on Log4J and its interaction with vCenter. My name is Matt Duran. I'm the Director of Training and Incident Response for LMG Security. I'm also a Black Hat instructor where we teach classes on ransomware and cyber extortion response and prevention. We also have a new book coming out in just a little bit this year on ransomware and cyber extortion in general and how you respond to and react to those kind of incidents. With me today is Tom Pohl. Tom, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Tom Pohl. I'm the penetration team testing team manager here at LMG Security. I'm also a senior security consultant, and really I'm nobody special, but you can find me on Twitter at Tom Pohl.
That's great. Thanks, Tom. And thank you for being here. We always love having you on the cyber alerts with us. So today we're going to be talking about Log4J and its interaction with some of the more common Office frameworks that you may be used to, including vCenter, which is what our demo is going to be on. Now, Log4J is kind of like the vulnerability that will not die, and there's a good reason behind that. So this was originally announced in December of 2021, and according to multiple media outlets that cover cybersecurity and information technology in general, this vulnerability lit the internet on fire. There were so many different products that were impacted by this one specific vulnerability that it became almost impossible to track. This is a widely used error logging service that's an open source component of many different software applications. And multiple vendors were impacted by this. Cisco was impacted by this, AWS was impacted, Google, many, many more. In fact, we're still to this day having new manufacturers coming out publicly stating that while they didn't think they were affected in the first place, they have since discovered that a smaller component of their software may have actually been vulnerable to this. This is a remote code execution vulnerability, which basically allows an attacker to take control remotely of a system and run commands arbitrarily as they see fit. So what can hackers do if they actually gain access to a system using Log4j? And the answer is quite a bit. They can do things like execute commands, as we said. They can steal credentials. They can move laterally throughout other pieces of your network. They can install more malware, and they can steal your data. This has been a major problem for a lot of organizations just because of how versatile this vulnerability can be once an attacker actually gains a foothold using it. One of the big things that we've seen pushed out using Log4j has actually been a resurgence of crypto miners and botnets. And this was kind of interesting. From a case that we did with a mobile iron server pretty recently, we were working through trying to identify how Log4j had been used to potentially compromise a system, and we found an old friend. And that was a combination of the Mushtik botnet, which is a cryptojacking botnet that mines Monero using the CPU of an infected host. And we also found the Mirai botnet, which gained infamy a few years back for literally taking the internet offline for a considerable period of time by taking down one of the major DNS providers that was responsible for routing traffic for many high-profile internet services like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and many, many more. Likely, in a lot of cases, we're seeing multiple adversaries trying to exploit Log4j simultaneously against systems. So this is very akin to the Exchange vulnerability that we saw. Now that this has become public and there are public proof of concepts everywhere for it, hackers have rejoiced and are spraying these types of exploit attempts all over the internet. So Mirai botnet, we just figured we'd take a quick shout out to that, or shot back to that, because it was a kind of a big part of the history of LMG and our cybersecurity plans. Mirai is a botnet that was notorious for taking over Internet of Things devices. So things like security cameras, routers, anything else that was on the internet that ran a very specific version of a Linux media controller. Now that we have an in with Log4j, we've started to see this move itself more into the realm of production servers and not just IoT devices. So the footprint's been expanding and has been greatly growing in how strong the DDoS attacks that the Mirai botnet is used for can possibly be. Now, the source code for the Mirai botnet is public. This was released by the original authors prior to them being arrested for creating the Mirai botnet, and it has since morphed into any number of different variations that are becoming more popular and harder to detect. LMG actually did an experiment a couple of years ago where we took the most popular nursery cams from Amazon and reconfigured the Mirai botnet to infect those and turn them into cryptocurrency miners. If you're interested in that, check out our RSA presentation on the topic. You can also see us mentioned in Scientific American, which was pretty fun. Now, again, Log4j and the Mushtik botnet are just a couple of the potential outcomes from an infection utilizing Log4j as the entry vector. But to show you what else can happen and some other kind of interesting things that we found, I'll turn it over to Tom and let him give you a demo of what this looks like when we go after one of these more popular software services. Tom, if you want to grab the screen, take it away.
Yeah, here, let me take control. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is basically how we can take advantage of a very popular software tool in enterprises called vCenter. vCenter is great. It's, you know, it's different than like just ESXi, right? So there's VMware puts out a hypervisor where you can run your virtual machines. vCenter is kind of that orchestrator that can help manage your cluster of ESXi servers. And so the vulnerability with Log4j is actually in that manager. So that kind of the quarterback on the field has got a vulnerability. And we're going to show you here today how we can take advantage of it. So in the last 2 weeks, I've been on 2 different internal penetration tests of enterprise networks, and this has been an issue. And so we labbed this up in our pen test lab here at LMG, and I want to show you just how easy and scary it is to take advantage of this network vulnerability. So right here, we've got the vCenter in our marvel.local network that we've got access to. So if this is publicly available on the internet, like I guarantee you it's already compromised, but this is in our lab environment. So we're kind of on the same network as this vCenter console. And if I go and click on login to, I get a login page to sign into vCenter. Well, we're going to log in, but we're not going to do it using a username and password. What we're going to do is we're going to trigger it. We're going to trigger this Log4j vulnerability into giving us access. And so I've got a couple of shells here that I'm logged into a network that's on the same subnet as that vCenter. So I'm basically on the same. I've got network connectivity between me and that host. So I think that host is that. Let me double check here. So that host is 172.16.2.18. I'm sitting at 2.4. So I'm literally within range of reaching it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick up a couple tools. The first tool I'm going to download, I'm just going to do this live. I'm going to go from I've got a login page on vCenter that I know is vulnerable for Log4j, and we're going to take you through downloading tools and running them, and then basically completely compromising this host. So the first thing I need to do is I need to go grab the rogue JNDI server that was put out by Veracode. And so I've just got a little one-liner that'll go download it. It'll package it up. It uses Maven to build it, and then we'll run it. Then we'll sit here. It'll sit here and listen for requests. So what this rogue JNDI server is basically it acts as an LDAP server. So the vulnerability that we're going to trigger in Log4j is the JNDI LDAP version. So we first need an LDAP server for our vCenter server to talk to. So so we're going to fire up, and this LDAP server is the only thing it's going to do is feed the commands back to the person that called it, say, I want you to run this. And so we first have to download that server and then we'll run it. But the first thing that we need to do before we can just run is we need to come up with a command that we want that server to run. So basically from the server side, I want that server to reach out to me, because I'm going to be sitting here listening for a shell, and I want that server to basically run this command right here, this echo netcat. Netcat's already on vCenter server, so that's really great for an attacker. And I want it to basically throw me a shell, because I'm going to be listening. This is my client IP. I'm going to be listening on this port, and I want it to basically throw me a shell. But we have to base 64 encode this for this to be fed into our rogue JNDI server. So we'll go over here. We'll put the command that we want run on our side. Oops, sorry, wrong button. And so we'll take this command. So now that's encoded, there's nothing special about it. We can decode it. It comes back to the same thing. So we'll take that command and we will paste it there. So I'll save it, and then we'll feed that into our rogue JNDI call. So we'll put that there, and then we'll grab the command that we want that guy to run, and then we'll grab the rest of our command that we want, and we'll actually fire up the rogue JNDI server, listening, waiting for anybody to connect to us so it can feed it the command to run on the remote server. So it's basically going to feedback like, hey, we want you to like base64 decode this thing and run the command. And so we're sitting up here listening. So we've got a rogue LDAP server on our local machine that when somebody is going to request, we're going to feed them back some information. And then now I need to set up my listener. So I told that server, I'm about to tell that server, I'm going to be sitting here listening on port 2222 on my local host. So I'm going to sit here, listen for that. And then now all we have to do is go back and basically trigger that call. And here I'll unpack this for you. We're just going to call that vCenter host. We're going to go to this same SAML request. We're going to leave the SAML request off. We don't need that. We're actually just going to, we're overloading one of the headers. So this is not even a request directly to the web app. We're just making a generic request to that server, and we're feeding it in our attack JNDI string. So here's our attack JNDI string where we're saying, hey, I want you to connect to this LDAP server on port 1389 and make a request for OTomcat. And when it does that, that's when our rogue JNDI server is going to feed that request to the server and then dutifully run it. And so all we have to do is make a quick little curl connection, and then we'll actually get a 400 bad requests back. But if we go back to our netcat, I can say ID, I say, look, I'm root. I can do df, I basically have a shell on this remote box. And so once I've got this root shell on the remote host, it's like, what can we do with that? And so this is where, like, okay, we've got a shell. What can we do? It's got some resources locally, but since this is kind of the orchestrator, he's not running virtual machines on the vCenter. He generally doesn't even have access to data stores. And so, but we want access to the things that have data stores, and that would be through the actual web interface. And so in order to log into the web interface, we first want to grab some secrets. And so now that we have that we've got shell access, where are the secrets on the vCenter server? And I can tell you in storage DB VMware VMDir, there's this data.mdb file, and what's in there are private key. So there's a private key to your SAMLs, because all logins to vCenter are done through SAML requests. The private key that signs these requests is actually on the box. And so if we can obtain the private key to their server, we can then make our own SAML requests and sign them and be like, no, we're totally logged in. So instead of actually going to an identity provider and actually logging in and doing all those things, we'll actually say, no, we signed this request, so this is a legit request. We can be whoever we want. And so, but we have to first get that host or that file off that box. So I've got another little tool that we need to grab real quick, which is just a simple Python HTTP server that will allow us to upload that file from vCenter back to our attacking host. And so I'm just going to run that real quick. It's a simple HTTP server with file upload. And then basically I'll go back to my vCenter host and I'm going to say, I want to upload, and there's curl is already on that host as well. So it had netcat and curl on the vCenter server. So it's like all the tools the hacker really needs are already pre-installed for this exploit to work. So I'm going to basically take that MDB file and I'm going to post it as a file to my now running Python server. And so I just run that real quick. It's going to upload it. It's been successfully uploaded. And actually, I don't even, at this point, I don't need that root shell on vCenter anymore. I'm done at this point because I've got all the secrets. And you can see here, yep, we've successfully uploaded the file, and we look, there's our data.mdb. This is on our local host. So we've got all the secrets locally. Now what we need is we need to get a tool to actually use those secrets. And so the next tool I'm going to install here for you is called vCenter SAML Login. And this one's put out by Horizon 3 AI. This is a pretty cool tool where basically, and it'll take a minute or so to install, but basically what it'll do is you give it that MDB file, it will extract out the private certificate, and then you feed it the vCenter server that you want to go try to log in with this. It'll forge the SAML certificate, sign it, and then post it to the vCenter server, and then give you back the specific element that we need in order to be able to go make an authenticated request. So that tool is installed now. So what we'll do is the command we need to run here is basically we'll run this vCenter SAML login Python script. We'll feed it that data MDB that we just downloaded from that remote server. And then we're going to say our target is vCenter.marvel.local. So basically, once it extracts and it'll create the SAML assertion, and then it'll go ahead and log in. So we'll run this tool real quick, and it'll tell us all the way along. It's extracting the certificate. It's finding the full host name for the servers, generating the SAML assertion, signing it. Then it'll log in with that assertion, and then now we've successfully attained the administrator cookie. So we now have this JSession ID cookie that we can go use. So we'll go back to our login page. This is kind of the really exciting part. Is you go, into web developer tools. We've got our cookie here. This is the cookie of the session that we, our unauthenticated session token that we have. So we just replace that session ID with the session ID of that we just got from our little tool. And we'll replace the URL with that UI login. And so now this time, instead of getting redirected to a login page, we are now physically logged into our vCenter server. And once we're in vCenter, this vCenter is, there's not much there. It's just got, our vServer login. But in most corporate networks, you're going to have all your servers are there, like your domain controllers, your file servers, you name it. All your infrastructure, if you're fully virtualized, is now available to an attacker to do whatever it is that they want to do with it. In one of my recent engagements, I was able to come out here and actually go to the data store into the server and actually download the hard drive of the server that we were logged into. And so once I was able to, of the domain controller of their network, and once I did that, then I was able to forensically retrieve the ntds.dit in their system hive, and I was then able to dump all the passwords for all the users on their domain, and which included their domain admin password. So at that point, I was effectively now a domain admin on their network. And so that's kind of how scary it is. It's like once you've got access to this interface, you have access to really gaining access to all the keys of the kingdom.
So Tom, with the tools that you use to perform this compromise, and thank you again, that was a great demonstration. With the tools that you use, I mean, anyone can download those, right? Correct.
Yeah, these are publicly available. They're all on GitHub. Yeah, pretty much they're all on GitHub. So yeah, these two, and this is just one POC. Like they've even made like whole Docker containers that will automate all of this, so that all you have to do is feed it an IP address or a host name, and it will automate all of this away for you. So it's almost script kiddie-ish, where it's like you don't need to know anything in order to be able to exploit this vulnerability.
Oh man, that's terrifying. So tell me a little bit more about what you just showed us and what it kind of implies about what we would have to do from a response standpoint. Now, if you've got the secret keys for the server, is just getting rid of the Log4j vulnerability going to really help us that much in this case?
No. So that's the extra scary part, right? So on this recent engagement, my client, after I stole the keys, he patched. Right, he patched his server. He's like, "Thank you so much. I patched it." I'm like, "Well, I was able to validate that the patch worked. I wasn't able to use the Log4j vulnerability and get a root shell anymore, but it didn't stop me from logging in, because now that I've got a copy of his secret key, like I can now continue to use that forever." And so as long as they don't change that SAML private key, then anybody that has a copy of that then can still log in and use this interface. In order to actually remediate, if the best thing to do is burn the infrastructure down, quite honestly, because you can't trust it anymore.
Yeah, that was gonna be the next point here. So in cases like this one, where we've compromised an essential piece of the underlying software being used to run the system, is there really a good way to ensure that you've remediated this problem by just removing a couple vulnerabilities, or is it, in your opinion, better to nuke it from orbit and basically just start over if you have that option available?
Yeah, exactly. I hope maybe in a future episode you can go through the logs and you can look at the the indicators of compromise, right? So that we can take this from the blue team perspective as well, because yeah, it truly is super difficult to know, that you've truly fixed everything, right? And like, like I said, if it's already been compromised, you absolutely can't trust it. You have to nuke it for more, but you've got to burn it down and rebuild it.
Well, I'm sure that's not what any IT people out there would like to hear, but realistically, it does come to that sometimes when we're talking about, especially something as critical as the kind of vulnerability that we've just put out there right now. I mean, that's it's amazing to me that with just those couple of toolkits and basically access to the login page, you're able to fully take control of this entire vCenter server and more or less become the permanent admin until something drastic happens on the victim's end to stop you from getting in again.
Well, and what's also interesting is that unless you're syslogging off your vCenter server, you're not necessarily going to be looking for, I can come in here and I can say, oh, I can create local admins on the platform. So like I come in here administration, and like, whereas if it's connected to an Active Directory environment, that's fine. But I can still come in here and create a local account on the local vCenter interface. And that, that often, I'm not adding something to your Active Directory directly. I'm adding something to, the local server here that then I can, create my own username and password. There's just so many, exciting angles that an attacker can take, to try to keep persistent access after you've lost your keys.
Well, that was great, Tom. Thank you again so much. It's always great to see things from the red team perspective on these types of vulnerabilities. Instead of just showing off some screenshots of Lognet on the back end, although that is very cool. I mean, that's the world I live in. But again, we really do appreciate you jumping in to show us this. So how do we defend against this, and how do we respond now that we are fully aware that these vulnerabilities are out there and are still actively being exploited in the wild, and in a lot of cases haven't been fully identified? Well, there's a few things that you can do. First off, make sure you have an inventory of the hardware and software that's being used inside your network. If you don't know exactly what you're using, then you can't really effectively defend if there is a critical vulnerability in a downstream product like the Log4J vulnerability, affecting something that you may be relying on. Also, check with any third-party suppliers that you rely on. Were their systems affected by this? And if so, is there potential for access to your IT resources or your environment? Again, patch everything. Make sure that you're staying up to date on your patches. Make sure that you are deploying those as quickly as possible within reason. And keeping everything up to a level where it can be fully secured will not leave you open to these kind of vulnerabilities. Contact a trusted security partner if you're unsure, though. There are many companies just like us that are out there dealing with these incidents on a daily basis and can provide you with great guidance on how to move forward and how to protect yourself in the future. And as Tom said, consider what happens if you need to rebuild effective systems. If you need to take your entire vCenter infrastructure down and build it up from the ground up, what is that going to look like on your end? How long is that going to take? What kind of resources are you going to need? What kind of time commitment do you need for that? Can you still function as a business while that rebuild is happening? And most importantly, stay on your toes. These vulnerabilities get released frequently, and they are sometimes fairly isolated to just a couple of very esoteric systems. Other times they are worldwide, like we saw with Exchange and Log4J. So again, something that you need to pay attention to. Check threat intelligence sources. Make sure you're paying attention to the cybersecurity newswire, and don't find yourself caught off guard if something like this does come up. So that will do it for us today. Thank you so much for attending. Again, my name is Matt Duran. Thank you again to Tom Pohl for being here with us. We always love having you here, Tom. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to us, info@lmgsecurity.com. You can find us at LMGsecurity on Twitter, find us on LinkedIn, and make sure you like, subscribe, and follow us for more information. Thank you very much.